absolutely love action and sci-fi and Paul Verhoeven films, so the Robocop franchise has always had a special place in my heart. So today I'm going to stop and rank all 4 theatrically released Robocop films from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of the Robocop films. I didn't include the made-for-TV Robocop films associated with the TV series because I haven't seen them, but if you've seen them, go ahead and throw them in your ranking. Also, I've done some other rankings of 80s and 90s sci-fi action movie franchises. You can see those up here in this playlist. If you've enjoyed this video, there's definitely something up there that you'll like, and let's get started. Easily in last place is Robocop 3. Now, I think the basic idea of this film is perfectly fine. The idea that OCP is trying to clear out certain neighborhoods to be able to build their new Delta City, that works as a plot for a Robocop film and him having to go against them. All good Robocop stuff. The execution itself, wow, quite bad. Right off the bat, the movie just almost utterly lacks the satire that you found in the original film. It misses the entire point of the commentary about capitalism and what if you had ultra capitalism where everything was run by corporations. All of that is gone, even though the ingredients are all still there. And so it just feels really odd as it plays things straight that should be played as laughs, and then out of the blue, like 45 minutes into the film, there's a couple of suicide jokes that do not work because it isn't surrounded by the satire, so they just feel like really off-color jokes for that point in time in the film. Beyond that, there's just all kinds of just bad execution, bad staging of scenes where you have the police like opening fire with machine guns at a building and a little girl just runs and stands in the door to watch the gunfight. It doesn't make any sense. And that's the sort of stuff that just pulls you out of a movie when you're just watching people do things that no human would actually do. Beyond that, Robocop is kind of on the back burner in this film. He's barely in the first 30 minutes. Then he shows up for 10 minutes. He gets injured, so he's gone for another 20 minutes. And he keeps disappearing for large stretches of the film, which is weird because it's called Robocop. They also have kind of this ninja robot in it that it just doesn't fit the franchise. It just feels goofy. It feels like if that tech existed, then we wouldn't have the Robocop tech. And so that doesn't feel like it should be explained or it should be more exaggerated. And the fact that he's a ninja just adds a level of corniness to it that is incredibly distracting. So overall, this is a movie that had the right premise for a good third Robocop film, but did nothing right with the execution. In third place is Robocop 2. Now, I'm sure this is going to be a hot take for a bunch of you that I have the remake ahead of this one, but this one has just always just been too cynical and mean-spirited without enough of the satire to kind of take off the harsh edges, so it just kind of puts a bad taste in my mouth. A big part of that is like at the center of the plot is the fact that these evil drug lords are exploiting a child to do evil things. So if you're this sociopathic kid killing people left and right, dealing drugs, and then of course the way he's treated and gets killed off itself, just such a nasty, gross plot line. And obviously the first Robocop is filled with that type of nihilism, but it's part of the satire that it's a dark comedy, where here it feels a little bit more like they're just making a mean-spirited film. Beyond that, there's some plot lines that never fully worked for me. Like the city doesn't like the way Robocop's behaving, so they give him reprogram him to be nicer. He goes off, he acts corny for one scene, and then he go back and he fixes himself immediately. So just like a script problem of like they had an idea that they threw it in there and they immediately undid it. And just in general, the flow of the story, I I think could have been a little bit better in how they balanced it. I feel like we needed Robocop 2.0 to happen like 30 minutes later in the film, or earlier in the film, not later, earlier in the film. And so you kind of have the two main plot lines running parallel. So as the city is starting to like Robocop less, you have Robocop 2 show up that's loved by the city, but Robocop's the one that figures out something's not right here, as opposed to having them one after the other where neither one is fully developed. Run them parallel, play them out a little bit better. I think the story would work better. So there's some great action in here. I mean, I love the finale, where you have all these robots duking it out and everything like that. That's all awesome. There's a few jokes here and there that kind of landed for me, but just in general, it just always puts a bad taste in my mouth. Our runner-up is going to be the remake. Now, I know a ton of you hate this film, and so this placement is bananas to you, and I understand why. I've always felt like the biggest hindrance for this film was the simple fact that it's a remake that we didn't need of a Paul Verhoeven movie, and they took Paul Verhoeven that's like spicy food, and they made it very much generic PG-13 blockbuster film. But if the previous movie didn't exist, the first hour of this, I thought they found an interesting, different take on the Robocop story of when Murphy is first kind of turned into Robocop, he still has his humanity, and they slowly take it away over the next 40 minutes of the film, where first he loses his body, then he loses some of his ability to make decisions, and then they take away his emotions. And so you actually watch him lose his humanity. And so it has a very different vibe to it in the way the story plays out and the treatment, the exploration of what would happen to Murphy, while still having these themes about what is and isn't a person and Murphy's journey to regain his humanity. But with that said, this movie does get really clunky as soon as Robocop becomes a police officer. It feels a lot to me like at that point in time, they started reworking it with reshoots or something like that, or they shot a 2.5-hour movie but only wanted a 2-hour runtime. And so a bunch of stuff is just missing. Like right when he becomes a cop, it starts montaging stuff, jumping between scenes, things move really quickly, where it felt like that first hour they developed it, you moved from piece to piece to piece, and it gets scattershot in the second half of the film. I think it lands all right. You get some good action that's a little bit different, kind of resolving these plot lines with the corporation a little bit, but certainly the first hour of the movie is a lot stronger to me than the second hour of the film. And in general, it's not great. It's okay. It's decent. It just doesn't put a bad taste in my mouth the way the second one did. But of course, coming in first place is the original Robocop, Paul Verhoeven's unbelievably dark satire of capitalism and corporations that just takes everything and cranks it up to 11. Just the worldview of these characters and how much they've just sucked out the humanity in pursuit of corporate greed, to how viciously violent the whole movie is, that Paul Verhoeven just loves to like make violence over the top to show you the absurdity of violence at the same time. And he just has an eye for how to make it much more visceral than most action movies of that time period. Sometimes simply just because there's so much blood spraying out of everything. It's also a movie that has a deceptively good cast. Like if you watch it, it's not like everybody you see is an A-lister from that time period or afterwards, but so many of these side characters went on to have fantastic careers. Like 4 of the henchmen, or 4 people in this movie ended up on the TV show 24, a lot of actors in a bunch of different stuff. And to just give these great performances inside of this film. And just even at its core, for a movie that so much of it is just intentionally dark and sadistic, at its core, it's a story about a man who loses his humanity, regaining his humanity in a world that's lost its humanity, which in and of itself is just an interesting way to tell a story that makes this robot the most human person, most human thing in this world that's just turned so unbelievably dark. Add to that, it's got a fantastic, heroic score, one that not enough people talk about how good the Robocop theme is. Of the iconic 80s action sci-fi franchises, I feel like this one doesn't get discussed as much, probably because none of the sequels really lived up to the original, whereas with Terminator, you have Terminator 1 and 2. Here, you just have Robocop, and then the others are a lot significant drop in quality. I think for that reason, people don't talk about Robocop enough and how good this movie actually is, how well the comedy holds up, how good the satire holds up 30 years later. So for me, without question, this one comes in at number 1, and it's a film that I hope and wish more people will check out. If you've enjoyed this video, I've ranked a bunch of the other 80s and 90s action sci-fi franchises. You can check that out right over there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.